Or is that person using offensive as a weapon to get rid of someone who has the opposite views? Hello and welcome back to the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast, where we talk about all things misconduct. Today we are talking about what could be seen as a very sensitive subject, but I want to be clear on my focus. Today we're going to talk about censorship at work, or disciplining employees, firing employees for the things that they say, either while they're at work or on social media after work. And there are laws that govern these things. And some of you are going to say, I'm not strict enough or tough enough on it. Some of you are going to say that I am too far the other way. But my focus today is on how can we determine whether or not it is misconduct and what we do about it then. So before we get started, please subscribe, hit the notification button, leave a review, share with your friends. Please help me get this podcast out to those who would enjoy listening to it. Anyone who has ever held a job has had to deal with misconduct and can learn something or can find some similar situation in the topics that I speak about. Okay, let's get started. So, first thing right off the bat, the First Amendment does not protect speech in the workplace. The First Amendment is a protection against the government regulating your speech, not your employer, not the company that you work for. A lot of people don't realize that. They think it is an all-encompassing, I can say whatever I want, wherever I am, and that's not true. You can be disciplined or fired for the things you say at work. You don't have a First Amendment right, and of course I'm talking in the United States, to say whatever you want at work. It only applies to the government. So if you are a government employee, that's a little bit different, and you might have some different rights. But your employer, if you are in HR, you should know about these rights and laws. The other one, and I'm going to look to an article from SHRM, the Human Resources Association. This is an article from July 2018. Check the notes for the link to the article. And the article is titled, What Employee Speech is Protected in the Workplace? So, of course, speech or activity that falls under the National Labor Relations Act, or NLRA. So that protects employees' rights to discuss the terms and conditions of their employment. So that could be protected speech. If you're talking about the conditions of the workplace or of your employment, you're allowed to do that on social media, with your friends, with your coworkers. That's a law. It should be in your policy, but it's also a law, so that's covered as speech. You also have the right to talk about possible unlawful conduct in the workplace. So you have a right to talk about misconduct, to file reports on illegal activity or misconduct that you see in the workplace, harassment, discrimination, workplace safety violations, and other issues like that. Those are protected because they need to be protected, because you can't deal with those situations if someone can't safely bring them to light, can't safely make those allegations. So the big thing is social media. Where can you discipline someone for their posts on social media? Where can't you? And really the answer is it depends on where you are. The different states have different laws and different protections. So you need to know the state laws. If you're a human resources professional, you should already know the laws in your state. If you are an employee, look them up. Be proactive. That's one of the problems with employees, is they never actually take proactive measures to learn their rights in the state they live in. And they never actually look it up. They never talk to anyone of authority. They just kind of make it up or talk about it with their friends. And so they think they have rights that they don't. That's shame on you. If you're an employee, that's shame on you. If you want to know what rights you have in your state, look it up, go talk to your human resources director. And not only that, ask what policies. Okay, so if you have certain state laws, then what policies does your company have? How do they apply those state laws? The second article is from Comply Right, And it's from June of 2018. First Amendment in the workplace, can employees really say anything they want? Now, we've already answered that a little bit. And the point I want to get to and really talk about is how these are applied, how the rules are applied, how discipline is applied when it comes to what people say. There are protections in the workplace against harassment and discrimination. Those are very specific laws and guidelines and protections. And so if you have speech, someone says something in the workplace and you want to know whether it is acceptable or not, look to those laws. Was this discriminating in any way? Was it harassing? And you have to actually, I think the problem that we see is people tend to stretch the definitions there. When it comes to action, it's a little bit easier. You either did something or you didn't. When it comes to speech, people start to judge, well, what did they mean? How was it taken? It was offensive to me, but not offensive to that person. You need to use that objectively offensive standard. Would it be offensive just to a random reasonable person, not the specific person there? But you also have to take into account the specific person. So it is complicated, but use those policies and guidelines of non-discrimination and against harassment and apply speech to those guidelines. If that speech is violating or potentially violating those, you probably need to open an investigation to take action. So here is the part that might cause some conflict. Might cause a little bit of argument. You may not agree with me here. But the problem I see is that these rules or these policies are not applied evenly or equally to all employees. Even if you're working in an at-will employment state where you can be fired for any reason as long as it's not an illegal reason, the problem arises when you fire one person for saying something, but you don't fire another person for saying a very similar thing. You need to apply those standards evenly. Do you have to? Is there a law that says you have to? Well, now let's maybe not. I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I didn't go into the case law on this because I want to talk about more kind of the practical, what should we do perspective, rather than the actual legal case law behind it. But no matter what you're doing, you always get into trouble if you treat people differently. That's always a bad thing. Whether there's legal precedent or not doesn't really change the fact that that's going to be a problem. So where does that tend to come out? When does that tend to happen? It happens often, especially now in political speech. You can have a policy against political speech at work. In fact, that might be a smart thing. Let's just not even talk politics while we're at work. It's too divisive. It's too controversial. When you're at work, focus on your work. Focus on selling your products or building your products or writing your code or whatever you do at your business. Let's not talk politics. And if that's your policy, then anyone who does is violating your policy and you need to deal with that. And you need to follow your policy on discipline. Do they get a warning? Do they get fired? Is it based on what they said? What are those steps? What you have to be careful of is one side of the political aisle being disciplined much stronger or more often than the other side for when they're both engaging in political speech. You have your own political beliefs. You should have your own political beliefs. But you can't apply your political beliefs to how you do your job. So you can't discipline someone who is on the opposite side as you because you disagree with their beliefs. And then go lenient on someone with whom you agree. Now you're showing bias in how you deal with the situation. You are no longer being an unbiased party, you're showing clear bias. And in that kind of situation, it can be fairly easy to prove. When two people say something, they're on opposite ends of the political spectrum, they get in a political argument, one is disciplined and one is not. So you need to be careful. If you have an outright ban on political speech, then it's an outright ban. It doesn't matter what side you are on. If you allow speech up to a point where it becomes harassment or discriminatory, then you must allow it up to that point. So this is an unfortunate situation we find ourselves in presently, is instead of people agreeing that they disagree on politics, that they have different policy, they are taking it to the extreme of saying, I disagree so strongly with the other side that I find everything that they say harassing and offensive. So now you're falling into, well, this person was gauging in offensive speech. It was hurtful. It was offensive. I don't feel safe at work when this speech is present. And that's a whole different ballgame. But sometimes that's just rhetoric. Sometimes that's just the person using keywords they know will cause a bigger response. Sometimes it really is just a disagreement on speech. So again, refer back to your policies on discrimination and harassment and the laws. Is it objectively offensive? Because this person claims they were offended by it because they disagree with it, is it really offensive? If you asked a reasonable person, if you went to 20 reasonable people on the street and gave them the scenario, would they be offended by it? Or is that person using offensive as a weapon to get rid of someone who has the opposite views, to silence someone who believes differently than they do? And again, there's no First Amendment protection there. As a private corporation, you have a right to fire them, but is that the kind of business you want to run? And you can claim, well, we want our business has certain values and this was against our values. That's fine. Are those values actually documented? Have you actually articulated those values? And can you articulate why this is against those values and not just something that you disagree with? We've gotten to a point where people get personally offended by an opposing opinion rather than recognizing it as an opposing opinion. And this is happening on both sides. And again, I want to remain very on point and on topic with how this applies in the workplace. Make sure you're doing what is legal, talk to your attorneys, follow the law, of course, but also do the right thing. Also make sure that that you are treating people the same, because that's when you're going to get in trouble. When there's a pattern of treating one side different than the other side based on your own personal beliefs, when it's not actually objectively offensive, harassing, or discriminatory. Everyone thinks they're right. Everyone thinks that they are on the right side of this argument. Everyone believes that they are creating a better workplace by getting rid of people who are utilizing speech they don't agree with. So they justify it in their minds, and frankly, they justify it to those who oppose it by saying, that's not the kind of workplace we want. We want to get rid of people that doesn't fit our values. The problem is you're creating a reputation. You're creating this organization that actually does discriminate. You're creating the problem that you are trying to solve by getting rid of that person. Now, it's a little bit different, and you may be okay with that. You may be okay having the reputation as someone who doesn't allow certain opinions. And that's fine if you're okay with that and that's what you want. But remember, you're also discriminating against all of those customers as well. When they learn about it, when they hear that you would treat them differently than those with opposing ideas, they're going to go somewhere else. You are going to hurt your bottom line. It will become your reputation. And you have to decide if you're okay with that. You have to decide if that's worth standing up for firing, getting rid of people who have opposing opinions. And again, I'm not justifying and I'm not defending anyone who does say something that is harassing or discriminatory. Anyone who makes threats or is violent, any of those things that are either unlawful or against your policy. What I'm saying is you need to apply your policy the same consistently, no matter who's being investigated, no matter who filed the complaint. So what do you do when you get that complaint and you determine, yes, this potentially is against our policy, we need to do something against it, it's potentially discriminatory or harassing? Do we just fire them right now on the spot? Just like I always say, you should do an investigation. If it's a social media post that is the problem, your investigation may not take too long because you've got the evidence right there. You're investigating a post that you have available to you. But I would still go and do a couple of steps. I would still talk to people. I would still talk to the person who filed the complaint. I would still talk to the person who created the post. So that you can, when you make the decision, you're making it with all of the information. You understand the context and you can say, we did an investigation. We do an investigation in every case, no matter what the offensive post is. Because what if you look at it and you decide that's not a firing offense? That's not a violation of your policy. If you do an investigation, then you can articulate why you made a different decision in two different cases. If what one person says you determined was not a violation, and yet what another person says was, if you've done an investigation, if you have documented the people that you've talked to and the work you did to come to that conclusion, then you can defend yourself. If they come back later and say, this company is discriminated against this particular ideology, you have the records. This could be 2 years later. You can't remember every case. You can't remember every single person or employee that you've dealt with. But if you did an investigation, you will be able to pull that case file up, look at what you did, look at the interviews you did, the information that you gathered, and why you made the decision you did, which you can then use to defend yourself. You can justify your actions because they're documented. And because you maybe went the extra mile by being thorough. Apply that consistently on both sides. You'll never go wrong if you apply your policy consistently. You'll never go wrong if you treat both sides of an argument equally and without bias. And then you make the decision. Do you want this employee to continue working with you or not? This is based on your values. It's based on your workplace. It's based on the type of employees that you want to have. And that's fine. You have a right to do that. But make sure you can justify that through your investigation and make sure that you are applying that policy to everyone. If your CEO puts out an offensive post or tweet, your CEO needs to be investigated just like an employee was. If an employee had put out the exact same tweet or post, show that it's either accepted by all or not accepted from anyone. That's when you build trust. That's when your employees will start to live your values and respect your values because they know that you mean them. They know that those values apply to everyone, no matter who they are, or where they come from, or what they believe. And that's when your employees will trust you to make the right decisions, will trust you to come forward, exercise their legal right to report and talk about discrimination, harassment, and other misconduct in the workplace. Thank you for listening to the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, if you want to share your stories, your experiences in workplace misconduct or misconduct in education, let me know. You can go to my website, williamsconsultgroup.com/podcast, and fill out a form letting me know that you want to be interested, and I'll contact you and we can talk about your experience. But I want to share what you've been through with others so that others can learn from it. If you've been through it, someone else out there has too, and by sharing it, you are helping them through their experience. You're validating to them that this has happened to someone else and they can get through it, and there are other people out there. I want to hear those experiences, so let me know if you're willing to talk about them. And again, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.